What I would like to do here is give you a Bible meditation demo. Rather than talk about Bible meditation, I would like to give you a demonstration of a real meditation in progress as it unfolds. I'm going to do that by thinking out loud. I've done that a few times in front of a live audience. This is going to be the first time I do it in front of a computer screen. Now, my reason for doing this is that I think many of us learn better through experiencing something or being able to observe it than through hearing about it in theory. I want this to be an authentic demo, an authentic meditation, so I'm not prepared for it. That would be easy. If I spend a few hours working on a Bible passage, I can come up with a nice little Bible meditation, but that wouldn't be true to life. In real life, you might only have 10 or 15 minutes to open your Bible, feed on the Word, get something for the day. So I've tried not to think about the passage that we're going to look at. What I've done is, just before recording this, I've read the chapter that was up for my daily reading from the book of Jeremiah, and I've chosen one paragraph, and within that paragraph, one verse that stood out to me, and that I would like to do some thinking on. And I've copied that text, and you're going to see it on the next screen. So here we go. This is Jeremiah chapter 43, verse 4 and verse 7. And it's especially verse 7 that stood out to me. And Lord, I pray for this time of meditation on your word, that you guide me and that you open this word up so that it speaks anew to me and to those of us listening. Would you help me to engage this verse from your word? Maybe I should give you a quick overview of the context. Jeremiah chapter 43, we're almost at the bitter end of the book. Jerusalem has already been conquered. Gedaliah has been murdered. Basically, at this point, the people have come to Jeremiah and asked, should they stay in Judah or should they flee to Egypt? And the word of Jeremiah has been clear, they should stay, and they immediately reject this word and say, no, that's not what the Lord has spoken, and decide to move to Egypt. And then in verse 4 comes this paragraph. So Johanan, son of Kareah, and all the army officers and all the people disobeyed the Lord's command to stay in the land of Judah. Instead, Johanan, son of Kareah, and all the army officers led away all the remnant of Judah who had come back to live in the land of Judah from all the nations where they had been scattered. They also led away all the men, women, and children and the king's daughters whom Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard, had left with Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, so the one who's just been murdered, the son of Shaphan, and Jeremiah the prophet, and Baruch, the son of Neriah. So they entered Egypt in disobedience to the Lord and went as far as Tapanhes. So they entered Egypt in disobedience to the Lord. Well, that was the phrase that stood out to me. Let me read this a few more times. I want to get it into my head to be ready to think of it, to chew on it. So Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the commanders of the forces and all the people did not obey the voice of the Lord to remain in the land of Judah. Instead, they came into the land of Egypt, for they did not obey the voice of the Lord. They arrived at Tapanhes, however that's pronounced. Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the commanders of the forces and all the people, those who were still left, did not obey the voice of the Lord to remain in the land of Judah. And they came into the land of Egypt, for they did not obey the voice of the Lord. And they arrived at Tapanhes. So, in terms of what's repeated, it's obviously did not obey the voice of the Lord. They did not obey the voice of the Lord. They came into the land of Egypt, for they did not obey the voice of the Lord. I wonder, why did they not obey the voice of the Lord? The word of the Lord was to stay in Judah. Instead, they went to the land of Egypt. I mean, that has a sad irony, a contrast. The promised land versus Egypt, the house of slavery where they had come from originally. That's a bitter irony. But why did they not obey? I guess because they made up their minds already before they ever asked God or Jeremiah. But they did not obey, probably because they did not trust, because they feared. They were afraid to stay in the land of Judah. They were afraid of what Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, would do to them. Even though the word of the Lord was that he would protect them and bless them, they just did not believe that. They just could not believe it. It was fear that made them move. It was fear that made them move the land of Judah, where God would still have blessed them in spite of everything that had happened up until this point, and go to the land of Egypt, where Jeremiah had just warned them that God's judgment would continue. They came into the land of Egypt, for they did not obey the voice of the Lord. And sometimes when, Lord, if I begin to think of how this might apply to me, sometimes it is a challenge to just stay where you are, or to just quietly trust in a particular situation and not move, or not go somewhere else, or do something beyond what you've been doing. It can be difficult to trust and not move, or trust and not act. They did not obey the voice of the Lord, and therefore they came into the land of Egypt. They came into a bad place, and they came under the worst of conditions. They were there in disobedience. What can be worse than being in the what can be worse than ending up in the place where God told you not to go, and not having remained in the place where God told you to stay, in this case Judah? Well, I'm not, Lord, I'm not immediately, it's not immediately clear to me if that has, well, an immediate application to my life. But that certainly is a general truth, a general principle here. They ended up in a bad place under the worst of conditions because they were in disobedience. They let fear lead them, and therefore they ran away from the land of Judah, where they would have been safe, even though that looked a bit counterintuitive, I'm sure. The land of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar not being far away, they didn't feel safe. But because of your word, it was safe. Because of your word, they did not obey the voice of the Lord. They did not obey the word of the Lord. which would have kept them safe. Disobedience means unsafe. Well, it's a bit of a cliche, but the safest place to be is at the center of God's will. Well, they left the center of God's will through sheer disobedience. Lord, I pray that you help me to see what my Judah is, and not to move to the land of Egypt, the place of uh, illusionary security. The place of illusionary security. Lord, I don't want to go for that. I want to stay with your uh, with your will, with the place where you plant me, so that it's secure, even if it doesn't look secure. There's a real contrast here between what it looked like and what it felt like for the people, and what it really was. I mean, it looked and felt unsafe in the land of Judah, but it actually was safe. It's always the word of the Lord that makes the difference. It's the word of the Lord that makes the difference. That's very unfortunate. My echo just came in between, I think. Oh well. So, Lord, how does this lead me through my day? How does this lead me through my day? I want to rejoice. I rejoice and I choose to be in the center of your will and trust in your protection and your blessing when I do this. Uh, not running for the seemingly safe place, not running for the obvious natural solution, but resting and trusting in you, especially where your guidance is clear or where you are still silent, not to move. Maybe that's taking it a step further, not to move when God is still silent, when the voice of the Lord has not yet spoken. Not to be impatient and do something, but Lord, to wait for your provision. I thank you for this word, and I pray that you enable me to live it. Amen. So let's do a debriefing here. Now, if you were a live audience, I would ask you to come up with observations, what you noticed, what stood out to you in terms of process. I can't do that, of course, so I will have to debrief myself. What was the process? What did I actually do? Well, I started off with prayer. From the start, this whole exercise wasn't just a mental exercise, it was relational. I was reaching out to God through the scriptures. I started off with, after describing the context, with some chewing, just reading, repeating the text, getting the phrases into my mind, getting a grip on the text. And then there were some questions, sometimes implicit questions, more like observations, things I noticed, which could be formulated as a question as well. So there was a time of asking questions or noticing things, like what is repeated, why did they not obey? Why were they disobedient? I noticed irony and contrast, the Judah-Egypt thing in the text. I asked, how does this apply to me? Were there any other questions? I noticed more contrast when it was about Judah not feeling or appearing safe, and Egypt looking safe, but reality being the exact opposite. Judah would have been safe because of the word of the Lord, and Egypt, even though it looked safe, actually wasn't. So that's another contrast. And then I, toward the end, I asked, how does this lead me through my day? You may have noticed I struggled a bit actually applying the text more concretely to what I'm going to be doing this day or my situation now. So the question was, how lead me through this day? So looking for an immediate application from this passage and not just a general principle, which I found a little hard. This also shows a certain sequence or move later on toward increasingly looking for application. I never won an award for my handwriting. And a move toward more dialoguing, entering into a conversation with God based on the text. I speak to God and listen to the text and enter into sort of a dialogue or a trialogue between me, God, and the text. That became more important toward the end as I was trying to respond to the text and see its implications for me personally. So that's what happened in the 11 minutes or so that I was wrestling with these two verses from Jeremiah 43. And I hope this gave you a little idea, a little demonstration of what can go on in meditation. Actually, there can be many rabbit trails or dead ends. That's okay. Then you go back to the text and look for a new beginning and see where that leads. But there's going to be dead ends, and there's going to be interruptions like my battery running low and interfering with my quiet time right there. That too happens. So I decided not to redo it, but to leave that in because it's true to life. The phone will ring, someone will knock on your door, whatever. So that was my meditation demo. On the next screen, I'm going to give you a simple meditation exercise to have a go at this yourself. So here is a little assignment or exercise for you. I would ask you to take 10 or 15 minutes meditating on this verse. It is Matthew 4, verse 4. And take some time to chew on it, ask some questions, and as you do, to gradually move toward the specific questions handwritten underneath, and think about them, meditate on them in the light of this verse. How do you best meditate, feed yourself on the word? How does meditation work best for you? Is that when you're alone or with others so you can share? Is that in a quiet room or in a church building or outside walking around? Do you need to write? Have a journal ready or mark the text. How does meditation best work for you, and what would you actually do to make it work for you? So have a go.